Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 2021 Annual General Meeting. And it's so great to see everybody coming in and joining in on this call. So happy for you to be here. We are going to be covering this meeting today in two parts. One, we have our kind of overview year in review, and the team is going to be presenting that. And then at 11 o'clock, we'll be starting our AGM. So I wanted to take note that our board is here. We have Bruce Matthews, Cindy Longley. We have, I'm just trying to make sure I can see everybody. We should have Leonard Bruno, Fahim Gwadri, Rachel Au, and Rory Johnston. He may not be in attendance, so I'm just trying to check that he is. But I think he sent his regrets for today. And then I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody. And then from staff, we have Nancy Thompson, Executive Director. We have Rebecca Anton. We have Josh Herving. And then we have Seven Carnegie as well. And I'm trying to see if we're missing anyone. Anyways, I wanted to just start and welcome everyone, and then we'll get going into this meeting. So we're doing this meeting on Zoom, and just some helpful hints. So on your profile and your picture, if you can ensure your name includes both your first and last name so that we can track attendance. If you need to change your name, you can hover over it and click on the option to rename. There's like the three, I think you can right click or click on your name and then change your name. If you have any problems, please enter it at the chat at the bottom. At the bottom, you'll see a section where you can chat and enter some comments, and the team will pick that up. Also, please ensure that you are on mute unless you're wanting to speak and mention something, ask a question, or put in some comments or provide feedback. Move to the next slide. So for our agenda today, we're going to be doing, as I mentioned, the update, the year in review, and Nancy will provide that section. We'll go over return to squash and where things are at. There's been some recent announcements by the Provincial Health Authority as well as via Sport. The growth initiative and revenue generation will be presented by Nancy and Alan Brown. There'll be some new programs to discuss for the next season, 2021-22. Club Locker, there'll be rankings and membership management system to discuss the updates on that. So that'll be Bruce, Kathy, and Nancy. Safe Sport, some news about that by Rebecca. We'll have a section on questions and comments, and then we'll begin the AGM piece. And then we have a recognition of leadership that Nancy will take us through as well. Go to the next slide. Okay, so just to, we review our organizational chart. My name is Natasha Dukas as president, and there are portfolios that I'm responsible and oversee. With the board members, you can see them at the bottom with Bruce and the three portfolios he has there with Club Locker, Leagues, and Strategic Planning. Cindy Longley for Junior Development, Coaching, and Officiating. Fahim Gwadri is Court Advocacy, Finance and Audit, Junior Development and Strategic Planning. Leonard Bruno for Appeals, Finance and Audit, Masters in 55 Games Membership Task Force. Rachel Au, Competitions, Doubles, and High Performance. And Rory Johnson, 2020 Fund, Communication, Social Media, Post-Secondary, Volunteer Management, and Awards. There's a lot of activity that goes on behind the scenes with the organizations, and also trying to bring those aspects to the forefront to our membership and stakeholders. In terms of staff, Nancy Thompson is Executive Director, has been leading the expanded team of staff. So Rebecca Anton is Membership Services and Operations Manager, Josh Hooving, Program Coordinator, Seven Carnegie Preston is our bookkeeper, Richard Yendel is our Provincial High Performance Coach, Sean Zwickowski, the Roving Ambassador Program Coordinator. And then we also communicate out to the zone reps as well. So, you know, not only with the zone reps in each of the zones, we also have committee members as well to support that. So you can see that there's a large group of people trying to communicate the value of squash, to continue the engagement of squash, and to support the numerous programs that Squash BC is offering. And just to give you some aspects or understanding of the zone reps, they do have a very key role in supporting the organization and supporting the community. They are really a bridge between the organization and the community, really being kind of at the forefront in the front lines, if you wish, understanding what's going on, gaining the pulse, and then bringing that kind of feedback back into the organization. So there's many ways to communicate with the organizations, but the zone reps do have a very critical role in the communication process and support. So of the zone reps this past year, I want to appreciate their involvement and their assistance in just staying in tune with how everybody's been managing with Return to Squash. So in the Kootenays, it's Rebecca Vasilikakis. In the Thompson Okanagan Valley, Cam Martina. Fraser Valley is Sean Zwickowski. Fraser River is vacant at this point. So if there's anybody on this, well, we'll go into the zone next year. Vancouver Coastal, Nathan Ozog. Vancouver Island, Central Coast, South Island is Neil Henderson. Vancouver Island, Central Coast, North Island is Sean Baker. Northwest, Prince Rupert Smithers Terrace is Steve Hawes. And Northeast, Prince George area, Tech Fu. So thank you very much for all that you've done in this past year specifically to just help with the communications and engagement into your communities. So the zone reps for 2022, and this is to be presented to the board in June for approval. But at this point, the nominations committees has identified the following new zone representatives for the areas of Fraser River, Owen Belton. For the Vancouver Island South Island is Grace Thomas. For the Vancouver Island North Island, Wayne Baylor. And Northwest area, Richard Haley. So thank you for those for stepping forward to continuing to work through those requirements. The 2021 committees and task force. So this is another area where it is also critical and to the organization where a lot of work is done. They do a lot of the groundwork in alignment with the vision and missions of the organization. And so we have, I think in the last couple of AGMs or general meetings, we've talked about a little bit of the difference for the committees and the task force. And the committees are more longstanding, and the task force are ones that, if you wish, light the fire under the any initiatives that need to get launched pretty quickly and get a lot of work happening in the first phases of it before it can kind of become a more standing committee and more maintaining the flow of work and communication and the effort that's being done. So in the committee's 2020 fund, Andrew Lynn has been the chair of that committee for several years. So we really appreciate Andrew for all his contributions to that. The competitions committee is chaired by Rachel Au, and there has been progress on that front in a few different fronts. Court Advocacy Task Force, Alan Brown. So we, Nancy will go in more detail, but the launch of the court advocacy was extremely important this year, just due to trying to ensure that we aim to keep facilities and clubs open, supported, especially through this whole Return to Squash era that we're in. And there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes to do that and build resources available to help with that. Doubles, Gordon Pybus and Julian Joe. So thank you for the work that you've done. There hasn't been much activity on the double court, but I know that some clubs have even done leagues around that. I lost my agenda. And let me see if I can go back to my notes on my draft. Okay, junior development. So we're working through a chair for that committee right now. Membership, Leonard Bruno. Membership and ranking system, that is Bruce Matthews and myself, but we're more in an advisory capacity right now for that committee. We have the nominations committee, which is the chair, Nathan Ozog, which really appreciate I think we had a bit of an expanded role this year in that one. So we looked through board members, zone reps, committee members as well. The partnership committee, it still goes on in terms of working through the fundraising and the connections with our clubs and our stakeholders. So thank you to Alan Brown for all the efforts in that. The return to squash, Karen Levine has been exceptional in terms of leading that that group, and it really has been. It's a large group that of I would say club representatives, player representatives, representatives in medical, like have medical knowledge, and the connection to the VIA Sport and the public office, public health office. So it has been exceptionally challenging this year to try and to stay on top of all the communications, all the news that have been coming up, and deciphering that and communicating in a way to the membership that's clear and concise. So thank you, Karen. And the women and girls in squash, Shelley Neal, that has been a very busy committee as well. And they launched a 10-week program in the fall. And they still continue to put out excellent information and insight around how to engage more females in the sport. So congratulations to all these committees and task force for the work that they've done this year. So the next slide is really going into a squash a year in review. And I'm going to pass this to Nancy to just do the recap of, you know, what has happened this year, even though that we haven't necessarily been on court as much as we would like to have hoped. A lot has been going on behind the scenes through Nancy's leadership to ensure that we're all ready to go for when restrictions ease even further and prepare to get back into sport. So I'm going to pass this over to Nancy.
Terrific, thank you. I think, as you can tell, we're obviously having some technical difficulties because I noticed that the PowerPoint has gone down. So I know Josh is working on it. And whoops. Yes, I know Josh is working on it. And while he's doing that, Rebecca, if he doesn't come on in the next couple of minutes, are you going to be able to pull up the PowerPoint presentation?
I am just working on getting it.
Okay, terrific, thanks. That's good. In between the first couple of slides are our usual slides, so most of you have seen them plenty of times before. Anyways, I've got lots to say about our year in review, as usual. You know, obviously with COVID, it's been one heck of a year for all of us. And really happy that it looks like we'll be coming out of that and be back into a normal squash season, or near normal squash season, hopefully in the fall. I've had a lot of comments this year, you know, just from people saying, oh, I guess it's not very busy at SquashBC with no tournaments. And I went, oh my God, are you kidding me? This is probably the busiest year that I've been involved in the organization in the 7.5 years I've been here. You know, part of it certainly was COVID, and part of it was just the other, you know, COVID also provided other opportunities for us to look at different programming and things that we don't, you know, in some cases, things we don't get to very often. And you'll hear more about that. This year, I think what COVID I think really highlighted for us as an organization and for the board was was our membership and the makeup of our membership, being that most of our members on the individual side are what I would call competitive players. They are people that play interclub tournaments and leagues, and so with no squash, it meant people didn't necessarily rejoin. So our individual membership numbers went from our typical kind of 2,400, last year was a little bit less than that, but down to about 900. And on the club perspective, usually we have about 34 members on average, and that dropped to 24. But most of the clubs that were rejoined actually weren't open. A number of them were rec centers, and they never reopened their squash courts during the season. So I really want to thank everyone that did continue to retain their memberships. The membership money, or the membership fees, are critical to supporting our organization, to supporting the annual operating of our Squash BC and the programs for player development. One of the things that we were planning on launching last year was our new membership category, the recreational membership, which has a low cost of $12, and it includes many benefits. But because of COVID, we didn't do that, but we will this year, and we will be making a big push of that. And hopefully a number of people who don't typically play interclub will take advantage of the recreation membership at the low cost and to receive the benefits. Great, Josh, I think we can go to the next slide. And thank goodness, well done, you're back up. On the grassroots side of things, not a lot of activity, again, because of COVID. Roster's Sport Club was really busy early in the year, and they hosted 3 grassroots sessions. One of them was a youth at risk session, which was a new program for them and very interesting. This year's goals are going to be the same as last year, just continuing to build the program, create more events, introduce more youth to squash, and in more regions of the province. Next slide, please. Our junior pathway program, COVID gave us the opportunity to relook at our junior pathway program, which was originally created in, I think it was 2016. And it was time to have a relook at it. Jeff Bogue was instrumental in looking at the revision of the pathway program. Thank you, Jeff. And the new program it's built on the old program, but it's structured to create a sort of a structure for advancement, a pathway for advancement of kids as young to 3 to 4 years of age, from their first contact with squash through either competitive or the Sport for Life stream. And the Sport for Life stream is the more recreational stream. It also shows how players can move between competitive and Sport for Life, as we, many of us do as we play. The resources for the program were developed to guide the how-to for stimulating squash participation across BC. It's geared more to the volunteer coach rather than the squash professional. And it's presented in more of what I would call a marketing perspective. So marketing to the new players and their parents who may not understand squash as well. It's easy to understand and it's visually appealing. This is our draft visual, but there's much more to the program than what you just see on this particular slide. The program includes a coach's kit with marketing tools, activity plans, teach the teacher, and online mentor support. There are resources for parents and for facilities as well. So it'll be really great to see this program get launched this year, and you'll hear more about that over the summer. Next slide, please. Women and girls, well, congrats to our women and girls in squash committee this year. They met the challenge of how to organize a women's squash week activity in a year with very limited play. The committee created a 10-week challenge, which took place from late September to the end of November. The goal was to inspire and motivate female players to get back on court and play. It included a number of different events, informational, educational, and activity. The Emerging Female Leader Grants recipients last year were Trish Campbell of Bayside in Qualicum and Jessica Evans of Cheam and Chilliwack. Those grants were extended because they couldn't play or couldn't be conducted due to COVID. So they're extended until later this year, and then this program will resume as normal. And the other thing that happened this year was Faces of Women in Squash articles in the newsletter. So 6 of those were written this year. So that was a new feature. Next slide. High performance. Richard, I don't know if you're on yet, but if Richard is, do you want to take this one?
Hi there. Yeah. Excuse me.
Hey.
Yeah, so I'm Richard. I think I know most of the people on the call. We started our high performance program, our actual training program in March this year. All of our named athletes were given COVID exemption through the Canadian Sport Institute. So it actually worked out really well that we, built out. There's more athletes on the squad now that were there traditionally on these provincial squads. So we've been running training sessions for junior and senior elite athletes at Vancouver Racket Club, which we've been able to set up as a base, and we're looking forward to having one set up soon up on the island as well. So yeah, and the training was paused as the sort of second wave of COVID came, and we just restarted Thursday night this week, and basically we'll continue running through the summer now. So it's exciting that our juniors are out in some sort of training environment. And it's been a good collaboration of most of the pros, or a good collection of the coaches that are in town have been involved. So Thomas Brinkman at Evergreen's been involved, Victor Berg, Michael Thompson, and the athletes have been sort of working with each other as well. So it's been really good to have a good community program running.
Terrific. Thanks, Richard. And one of the things Richard may have mentioned this, but is the high performance during COVID is allowed to continue. That's been one of the PHO recommendations. So that allowed us to do that this time. Coaching. So, coaching, again, everything's affected by COVID. But the focus this year was on reviewing our coaches list, which dates back to the 1980s. It's a massive list. And what we did was we went through the list. Thank you to Cindy, who's the board liaison, and a few others. And Ben actually was involved in this as well, Uliana. We identified the current coaches and their level of certification and their interest in moving to higher certification. The same was done with facilitators and assessors. So this gives us now a better scope of how we can build our coaching program, where our gaps are in coaching across the province. So that's a significant step to being able to continue to work and build our coaching program. We were able to pilot the very first it's the new Squash Canada Squash and Cut Instructors course this year. And so we piloted in Northern BC and Prince Rupert with the communities of Prince Rupert and Terrace. There were 6 participants in that, and it was really successful. And the participants really liked the course. Ben led that course. We're looking forward to it being released formally by Squash Canada, because I think this is going to be a huge boost to bringing in more coaches at the club level and at the local community level across the province. We had got 3 grants this year in Northern BC. It was a big hit for coaching in Northern BC. The grants came from Via Sport. We were only able to implement one of them, and that was the coaching course we did in Prince Rupert. But the next 2 that are scheduled in the early fall are going to be in Prince George for the whole area. Will involve sort of 4 to 6 communities in that area, and then going back again to Prince Rupert and adding some elements that that Ben and Michael Thompson, the other coach there, and Sean, I thought would be helpful to those new coaches. So that'll be happening. And we also held our very first Squash BC Squash only NCCP course, Making Ethical Decisions. That happened last week. It was sold out, which was fantastic. And so that's something that we will be looking at doing in the future, holding more NCCP courses for squash only. So watch for those rolling out over the summer and the fall. Next slide, please. is officiating. Again, not much in officiating happened this year. Looking forward to the next season. We did hold a mini rules clinic for women as part of the 10-week challenge. Note the new Squash Canada rule about all athletes competing in Canadian championships must be certified at a minimum club level. And this year we purchased 50 new tablets for online scoring. So those are going to be available to clubs to borrow for their tournaments and test everything out. And last, Natasha and I worked closely with Squash Canada this year, as did the other provinces and territories. We've been working with them on their new strategic plan, which is going to be launched this summer. And you know, I'm proud to say that we really helped, and working with the other provinces, on bringing a focus to the need to grow the sport, the need to be looking at grassroots participation and bringing in more people. And that was certainly stressed by our province. You know, particularly we've had our growth initiative, our 5-year plan, that's the focus of it. And other provinces were feeling exactly the same. So the new strategic plan will include Squash Canada's strategic plan, a key focus area on growing the sport. So that's welcomed, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with Squash Canada and the other provinces and territories on that. And so with that, we're in the next section, which is squash updates. I think that's me again. You'll be sick of me. So our return to squash, lots going on. Let me recap briefly what Squash BC has done over the last year in regard to COVID. You know, restrictions began in March of 2020. Our first step after communicating those restrictions was to form a return to squash task force team and develop the return to squash plan, draft 1. There were 6 phases in that return to squash plan, and over the next several months that plan was revised numerous times based on the information that was coming out of the public health office and being interpreted via Sport. And we are where we were, you know, as of November, where really it's the only play on court can be 3 meters distancing unless you're in the same household. So lots of communication, which has been great. I think lots of collaboration and lots of sharing with between clubs. We held a series of webinars, and you know, clubs from across the province joined that. They shared the issues that they were facing or the challenges they were facing, and everyone pitched in and just shared their, you know, what they were doing to help overcome those challenges. So it was really great in that sense, and really proud of everybody for stepping up and, you know, helping everybody else out. It was great. This week, the PHO offered some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sure most of you have seen it. It's called the BC Restart Plan. It's a 4-phase plan. This is what you're looking at here. And it should actually, it's not our squash plan, by the way. It's the return to restart plan by the provincial government. And it's based on, you know, a 4-phase plan to ease restrictions based on case counts, hospitalizations, and the percentage of vaccinations. In this, squash is considered an indoor team sport. I know we're not a team sport, but that's kind of their general category that they call us. And so at this particular point, we're still in the same restriction that we have been since November. However, step 2, which is hopefully expected around June 15th, is going to allow our sport and those other team sports games. So games can be played for all ages, but with no spectators. And then if all goes as planned over the summer, by early fall in September, we should be back to squash at and I'll call it a near normal way. So crossing fingers that that's the plan. The next step is actually via Sport. What they do is they interpret the PHO order for sport in the province. And they've been doing that all along. So they're currently working on a return to sport restart. They call it the version 2.0 document, and that's expected to be released next week. There's going to be a general announcement on Tuesday at noon, which we'll be sharing the meeting link with all the clubs and coaches later today. And version 2 will help sport better understand how we reopen under this guideline of the PHO. And those updates, typically what's been happening is as the PHO moves from, step to step to step, Via Sport interprets that for sport and then shares that with all of the sport organizations, and we in turn share it with our members and our players. For us, it'll mean redrafting or creating another version of the return to sport plan or a return to squash plan. So that's where we're standing today. Really like to thank the task force that was involved in the original plans. There was a lot of activity on a very regular basis, very challenging, but everyone stepped up and we all did it and got out lots of information to clubs. Not necessarily what everyone wanted to hear, but it was the order of the day. So we did our best to get that information out. The next slide, please, Josh. Alan and I are going to be presenting the growth initiative. You've seen this slide many times. It outlines Squash BC's growth initiative, our 5-year strategic plan, which was initiated in 2019. The past year would have been the 3rd year of the plan, but again, because of COVID, we had to stop implementation of it. And so this year will actually be our 1st year of implementation. And implementation included a number of new programs, providing supports for our squash facilities to grow participation by attracting new players. The growth initiative is a significant shift in direction. Next slide, please. It's a significant shift in the direction and focus for Squash BC. Our goal is to grow squash, and to do that, we need to attract new players. New players means a focus on the recreational side of squash. It means changing how we communicate what squash is and why people should play. And we want to ensure that there are programs in place that support these new players at all ages and for all levels. This is truly going to be a collaborative effort between Squash BC and our member facilities and clubs if we want to grow the game and strengthen our sport. The growth initiative requires increased funding to build the future of squash. And with that, I'd like to introduce Alan Brown, the chair of the partnership committee, to share how we're going to do that and are doing it. Alan, you're on mute.
Thank you, Nancy. And hello, everybody. Yes, this is I guess it's really the end of the 2nd year, beginning of the 3rd year of the growth initiative. It started in 2019. I'm the chair of the partnership committee that is charged with the responsibility of raising funding to support the initiative, both in the short term, what we call kickstart funding, and also in the long term. On this slide, you see the 3 primary objectives of the initiative. First is to generate funding that will get us off to a fast start to allow Squash BC to implement programs which will involve a significantly increased expenditure relative to the past. Also, a very important part of this initiative is the development of new programs, which Nancy has started to talk about, which are targeted at growing participation, expanding the game, and also assisting facilities. We have a very large number of facilities that have no coaching services whatsoever, and there'll be a big focus of this. So the first 2 initiatives, which are the kickstart funding and the program development, are running in parallel. The 3rd initiative, which is the longer term funding objective, that will probably start, our focus will switch to that sometime in the next year, because we've been doing a pretty good job of the kickstart funding. Next slide, Josh. So with kickstart funding, we set a target for raising about $330,000 from individual donors, a total of about $500,000 from all sources in the first 4 years. A pretty ambitious target, but we've done extremely well in the circumstances. We started fundraising in 2019, really had about half of 2019 available to do that. We raised over $200,000 in that period. It was a fantastic response from the squash community. When COVID hit in March of last year, we suspended fundraising activities because we didn't think it was appropriate to ask people to donate money when they had other more important things on their minds. But we have more recently restarted fundraising on a restricted basis. And now we're up to about $255,000. So we're closing in on our initial targets and would anticipate that we'll reach that in the next year, which is pretty phenomenal given the circumstances. Next slide, Josh. So in terms of the fundraising, what this slide shows is the categories of donors we have. We've got a lot of support from our initial donors. All of this support has been gathered mostly from one-to-one approaches to individuals donors, because we wanted to get off to a fast start and we felt that was the quickest way of doing it. And our experience has shown that we were right. So we have donors from $10,000 plus down to $25 right across the board. Donations, of course, are tax creditable because this is a charitable effort. And so the after-tax out-of-pocket cost of making a donation is about half of the total donation actually made. You see at the bottom of the slide, there's a link to, this is the SQBC Building the Future webpage. I certainly would encourage anybody on the meeting, if they haven't made a donation, to think about doing that and helping to support the cause. So far, we have about 84 donors. We'd like to, as we go forwards, expand the support for the initiative so it's more broadly supported in the squash community. And so if you can contribute to that, that would be very much appreciated. Any amount would be very welcome. So going forwards, in this coming year, we have three primary goals. The first is to reach our target of $330,000, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to do that. The second is to start work on the longer term revenue generation plan, establish our strategic approach to that, and then begin implementing some of those plans on a sort of stage basis. We won't get too far into that in the current coming year. And then for Squash BC, of course, to roll out the new programs and services for facilities and players as conditions permit. And the news that we just got this week obviously indicates that we should make some good progress with that. So on the terms of longer term funding, here are some of the sort of components of that. I'm not going to get into any detail because we still have to do the strategic planning around this, but I will mention, say, corporate sponsorships as one. Squash Ontario generates $150,000 a year, approximately, every year from corporate sponsorships. We have very little. That's going to be one area that we're going to be putting a lot of focus on. We perhaps won't raise as much as Ontario does at this point, but perhaps half of what they generate each year would be a reasonable target for us. In any event, these are the things that we'll begin to focus on as the year progresses, and we wrap up the Kickstart funding campaign. So that's it for me. I'll turn this back to Nancy, and she's going to now talk a little more about the programs that the initiative supports.
Terrific. Thanks, Alan. A fantastic job by the partnership committee. Really impressive when you think, I mean, these are funds that are committed over a 3-year period in general. And when you think 84 donors and $255,000, impressive, very impressive. And it's going to really, we couldn't start new programs or even enhance our current programs without this type of infusion of funding. It's absolutely critical to doing what we're going to do if we want to grow squash. So last year, what we did was the staff team undertook a number of one-on-one interviews with many member facilities, but also some non-member facilities. And the people we spoke to at the facilities identified, tools and resources that they felt would help support them to, so what we did then is we have created new and enhanced existing programs that are based on those identified needs of the folks that we spoke to. The programs form the basis of the growth initiative strategy, which we expect will increase the number of people playing squash and support the facilities and clubs where squash is played. This is what I call the waterfall chart, and it identifies some of the new programs as well as some of the enhanced existing programs. New programs really being roving ambassador, local champions, post-secondary, online tools and resources, and court advocacy. Increased public awareness about squash. That's something that we absolutely have to do. I think what we've done, us and Squash Canada, it needs to be a partnership across the country. We all need to work on that, and then expanding our current program successes. And then you've heard Richard speak about the high performance program. And if we do all these things, then the planned outcomes are all listed on the right. So there's quite a number of them. And it certainly would be a brighter future for squash in BC. I'd like to introduce, at this point, Sean Zerkowski to share our Roving Ambassador program. It's a program that supports clubs, club volunteers, and coaches, and is focused on bringing new players to our game at the local level. Sean?
Thanks, Nancy. The ambassador programs had a bit of a slow start with COVID, as I'm sure everyone can imagine. The intent was to actually do our initial pilots back in January and February, but that hasn't been able to happen. So right now, the idea is we're trying to support clubs that do not have full-time staff, full-time pros driving programming and recruitment there. So targets right now are places like the Prince Rupert to Prince George corridor and the North Okanagan, specifically Vernon currently. So we've got trips planned to both of those areas in late June and then September for the North. And then trying to expand that program out as we learn what what works well and what hasn't been working well when we do those initial tours to the North Island, so the Courtney Comox Campbell River area, where we've got, at one point, I believe, 16 courts, and we've started losing courts there. And then Salt Spring, looks like we've got Cranbrook, Fairmont, and Sparwood in the wrong area. And then the East Kootenay, so Cranbrook, Fairmont, Sparwood, where we do have courts in rec centers that are accessible to the public, but no programming happening right now. So that's the idea behind the Roving Ambassador program, is to find those local champions, support them, and make these underutilized facilities more vibrant and more successful.
Terrific. Thank you. Another new program is the Post-Secondary Institute program. We call it the PSI program. It was made possible because of the financial support of the BC Jesters, who committed to 4 years of seed funding a couple of years ago. And that commitment led to a commitment in the first year of additional funding by the Canadian Jesters. The program includes post-secondary institutes with squash courts. There's only about 5 of those in the province, as well as matching post-secondary institutes with local squash clubs, so that we can create them in communities that there's a club and a university, and create a partnership there. The objective is to introduce squash to young adults at secondary or post-secondary institutes. We know from research and from hearsay that many people who play squash were first introduced at university. This year in Kelowna, Squash BC partnered with Global Fitness and UBC Okanagan to pilot the first PSI program. It was sold out in under 24 hours, which was fantastic. The program ran for 4 weeks before the November COVID restrictions caused it to be postponed or delayed. We also had other universities and colleges who were ready to pilot the program before COVID as well. And they were around the province, a number in the Lower Mainland like BCIT, UBC, and others. And we fully expect that the PSI program will be piloted in at least 4 to 5 schools this coming year, including the continuation of the Kelowna program. So very excited about that. And that may also this coming year have a bit of a competitive aspect to it. So we're working on that with UVic. Next slide, please. The Inclusivity program is a new program for us, and we were able to start working on this because of a grant we received from Canadian Tire Jumpstart Relief Fund. Squash BC supports a safe, open, and inclusive environment for all. We recognize that squash facilities across the province will be looking at ways to engage new players and encourage more people in their community to play squash. The grant allowed us to develop a series of new pilot programs targeted at youth, but they're adaptable to adults as well. The programs will support their communities and our members' facilities to reach new members. The programs are targeted for the Indigenous community, the girls, new Canadians, persons with disability. We specifically built one around hearing, deaf and hard of hearing. There are other opportunities for programs to be developed in other areas of disabilities. And the other was the Youth at Risk program, which I mentioned earlier, that had been piloted at rosters. So this will be rolling out this year. Yeah, it'll be rolling out this year. It's going to be exciting. The next one is court advocacy. And over the last 20 years in BC, we've lost many squash courts for various reasons. Everything from high real estate values to converting squash courts to fitness, to fitness areas, spin areas. To help mitigate the potential of more court closures, Squash BC formed a court advocacy task force. It's chaired by Alan Brown and supported by the Squash BC staff team. And this year the group sort of formed a pathway. And the pathway is to support facilities who are at risk of losing their squash courts by better equipping the facility management with resources that keep squash sustainable in their community, and looking at new opportunities to build squash courts, especially opportunities to build squash courts that are accessible and affordable to the public. One of the first steps of the task force was to research and analyze existing resources from around the world. Squash England, Squash New Zealand, Squash Australia, for example, have a number of resources, and 130 tools and resources were identified by the task force. Next, they were prioritized against the areas that the task force and staff felt were most relevant for our needs in BC, and gaps are being identified where tools and resources will need to be developed over time. Squash facilities at potential risks were identified as well, and initial reach out was made to those facilities. Phase 3 is just beginning, and it's going to include the creation of a web portal specifically for our member clubs and facilities where the tools will be housed for easy access and use. Direct support, where possible, will be provided to those facilities at risk of losing courts. Initial research into opportunities to build squash courts will begin, and business plans are in development to help support facilities at risk to provide positive reasons as to why to build squash courts. Those types of business plans are also very helpful when we explore opportunities to build squash courts. This is a long-term strategy, and it's going to require long-term ongoing effort and expertise. Next slide, please. Tools and resources. As I mentioned earlier, the Squash BC staff team had one-on-one interviews with many member facilities where the facilities identified resources and tools that they felt would help them. Resources I've identified included programs like the Roving Ambassador Program, the need for lesson plans and activities that the local club coach could use for their clubs, and membership recruitment marketing tools, just to name a few. 9 categories of the types of resources needed were identified, and you see those on the right. And the Court Advocacy Task Force looked at those various, the 130 tools that they identified, and we placed them under these particular areas. So we will create that web portal along with some under these areas, and that will be available to our member facilities. There are a number of tools and resources in production already, at the sport marketing package, facility programming package, introductory video series, Squash 57 promo video, and we have produced to date a number of materials as well. So we're excited by this, hoping that the tools and resources will be very helpful to facilities across the province. And yeah, look forward to sharing those. And this is an ongoing long-term project. Materials and resources will continue to be added every year to help support our clubs. I'd like to, at this point, share one of the sample videos that's being created to accompany the introductory lesson plan, as well as to help facilities market squash in their community. And we're creating a whole series, but this is the first one. So they're being professionally produced and high energy, meant to be, portray fun, the energy of our sport, and really looking forward to seeing the 15 plus other videos that, as I said, they're going to support our introductory lesson plan, but also provided to the facilities so that you can use them for your membership marketing campaigns. And there are varying lengths, everything from 15 seconds to a minute to two minutes. I'd like to now turn this over to Kathy Brown and Bruce Matthews to talk about the Club Locker, Squash BC's Club Locker transition.
Thanks, Nancy. What an exciting introduction with that video. That's great. So the Club Locker transition, or the whole rankings and membership situation that we face is underway, as we've discussed in the past. It's important to note that this whole initiative was initiated by Squash Canada's decision to create a national ratings and rankings platform for the country and the members within Squash Canada. So we were very, I guess, privileged to some degree that we already had some good tools in Squash BC. But to be aligned within Canada is an important benefit and structure for Squash BC. So we went through this whole process to evaluate a transition to the Squash Canada framework, which continues. And this update just underscores that we are on that path. The scope of the project will affect all of us in Squash BC. Specifically around the ratings and rankings platform. That will change. So all of us who are playing will feel that, or will observe that. The way we engage with Squash BC and the management system within the province will also change somewhat, and the supporting tools around that. And also in tournaments. So Squash BC sanctioned tournaments will run under this new structure and software platform. It will also be available to leagues and can be very tightly integrated into that. This is underway. And I guess the other important component is that these digital platforms not only support the organizational structure, tournaments, rankings, etc., but they also provide club management modules and services as well. And as part of our relationship with Squash Canada and through Squash BC, we can make those available to our Squash BC club members as well for their benefit, should they choose to use that. So I'd like to pass it over to Kathy, who's been our fearless leader in managing this transition exercise.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, so just want to quickly outline what we've done to date, and then more importantly, give you a little rollout plan of what's to come and at what point you all may be engaged or will be engaged, I hope. We did set up volunteer task forces. I won't name everybody, but thank you very much to those of you who attended demos by Club Locker and then did testing in each of the functional areas, whether it's leagues, tournaments, club management, Squash BC functionality. Quite a bit of time has been spent on that. By the task force, I we were looking really obviously to make sure that it would work for Squash BC, but also to identify any issues that we just couldn't live without and that had to be addressed before we implemented it in a full way, or like go live, if you will. So we've got a list, and Club Locker is working on things for us that we hope to have in place by August timeframe. And so that we're all sort of live on Club Locker by September. In parallel, we're also looking at transitioning, and Rachel's really, Rebecca's really led this transition of Squash BC's website to a Club Locker platform. So we'll have a more integrated user experience. So this is going on in parallel. Next slide, please, Josh. So this is high level rollout plan and how it will impact each of our stakeholders. I want to really, so from an individual standpoint, we will be communicating to the entire membership in June that we will be transitioning and asking permission that we can move your profile data to the Club Locker platform, which will be essentially the same as it being available to Sporty HQ. At the same time in June, and this is probably the most important thing, is you will be getting an email if you're a facility manager, club manager, or a pro, and inviting you to Zoom sessions where we will give you a very high level demo of Club Locker. I know that most of you have probably seen it before, but also to answer any of your questions and for us to hear your questions, actually, because we don't really even know all the questions that you might have. This is a time where, as a club or facility, you'll start sort of planning your own transition to Club Locker. Like, what components are you going to use? Are you going to use the membership, the club, the reservation? And we'll be wanting to hear from you as well, so that we can support you in your transition. I'm not going to read this whole, so those are the two most immediate activities that will be happening in June. And then in July, we will be giving Club Locker training sessions to, again, that same group, the facilities, facility managers, pros, and club managers. So that's probably, those are the activities that I want you to look out for, those emails. And I hope that you'll be able to attend one Zoom sessions. We'll give you a variety of date options that you can attend. So you'll just have to come to one of them. Well, you can come to as many as you want, but I hope you can come to at least one Q&A session and one training session. So from there we go on. I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but in August we will be moving profile data and ranking data will become rating data in Club Locker. Individuals will be sent their, an invite to log in and check their profile. Club managers will be looking at the profile data and making sure that everything about their club looks correct in Club Locker. And we plan to be running the first tournaments in Club Locker in August or September. So that's probably enough for now. Next slide, please, Josh. I do want to highlight a couple of things here. The resources for this project are essentially the same for all the other initiatives that you've heard Nancy talk about thus far. Club Locker does provide second line support to us, but Rebecca and Joss will be the first line of support to clubs and facilities as you transition to Club Locker. We plan to develop a tournament support team for tournament directors. Probably the most stressful thing is running your first tournament on a new platform. And we do have our tournament task force that I'm sure will step up to help. But if there's anybody else who would like to volunteer for the tournament support team, please let Rebecca know. What this would mean is being available 24/7, not quite, but right, to support those tournament directors running their tournaments for the first time on Club Locker, because that's when you need the instant support. So we hope to develop a support team that obviously you won't be helping. So, one group can help on one tournament and one group can help on another tournament. Similarly, we plan to develop a support team for clubs and facilities. And because I think Rebecca and Josh are going to need help, obviously. And so again, anybody who wants to volunteer for that, and I expect it will be the clubs who are using it in the most advanced way to be able to help other clubs. So this, we don't expect this to be smooth. There's going to be bumps in the road. The software is very different from Sporty HQ. So we all ask for another year of kindness, calmness, and patience, please, as we make this transition. And that's it, I think.
Yeah.
And before, Nancy, just before we leave this section, just on behalf of Squash BC, I wanted to extend our thanks to Sporty HQ. They've worked very closely with Squash BC over the last 5 years, have treated us like a partner, and been very, I guess, supportive and respectful as we've gone through lots of things. So we've benefited as an organization and a community for their support and generosity.
Terrific. Hear, hear. We have one more presentation on new programs, and that's our Safe Sport program. Rebecca is going to introduce that.
Thanks, Nancy. So yeah, I just wanted to give everyone an update of where we're at with Safe Sport and the responsible coaching movement. I know for many of you, this is probably something that you've heard bits and pieces of over the years. It is sort of a movement that's been gaining traction sort of nationally and provincially over the last number of years, with sort of the goal in mind to ensure that everybody who participates in sport, whether they be athletes, coaches, officials, volunteers, whatever their role is, they have a right to participate in an environment that's safe and inclusive and that's free of abuse, harassment, and discrimination. So Squash BC has spent some time recently kind of developing our rollout plan for how we're going to approach Safe Sport and the responsible coaching movement, sort of working off of national and provincial guidelines that we've been provided from our partners with Squash Canada and Via Sport. So our Safe Sport program includes 4 key areas around prevention, reporting, response and respond, and upholding. So a lot of that kind of falls into a couple key categories. The first being a review of all of our policies, which we have been undertaking over the last year. We're probably about, I would say, 75% of the way through reviewing our policies. Everything from code of conduct, privacy policies, screening policies are all being fully reviewed and changes being implemented. And as those policies are approved, they are being posted to the Squash BC website. So those are remaining current and up to date. And the other big one that we're tackling is ethics training for various different categories. So that's this chart that you see on your screen here. And again, this is kind of taking direction most closely from Squash Canada in terms of their requirements, and also kind of looking at what other sport organizations are doing around this area. So we've split it up into a number of different categories, including coaches, staff, board of directors, high performance athletes, tournament chair or safe sport rep for tournaments, as well as parents and volunteers. So this will be being rolled out throughout the summer and fall, with the intention that these people who are tied to Squash BC. So when I'm talking about coaches on this chart, sort of the short-term goal is all of those coaches who are hired by Squash BC for Squash BC programs. So we're talking about your high performance coaches, coaches that we send to work in the roving ambassador. Those sorts of coaches are the ones that we're speaking about in this voice here. The long-term goal will be to create recommendations to work with clubs to roll out Safe Sport within their environments as well. But for now, we're sort of focusing more on the internal rollout. So this is a chart which kind of outlines what training requirements will be put in place for these different categories. Some are required, some are recommended, as you'll see on the screen here. And this is the majority of these courses are sort of online, on-demand type courses. So if you fit into one of these categories, then it will be a requirement for you to take these courses. The vast majority of them you can complete online on your own time. So you're not sort of needing to schedule yourself around when one particular course may be taking place. So this is definitely still something that will continue to be rolled out, and more information will be coming to clubs and our members in the coming weeks here. But it is definitely something that we're putting a high priority on moving forward here.
Terrific. Thank you. And that's the end of our presentations. So we are running a little bit late for our AGM, but what I wanted to do was open up questions for about 5 minutes right now, then we'll start the AGM. And then at the end of the AGM, after we have a little special presentation, we'll stay on and answer any other questions by anybody. So that's going to be the agenda. So with that, I'll open it up quickly. If you can, there's 2 ways to do it. Unmute yourself and ask a question, or via chat.
Hi, Brian here, Covington. I've got a question for Rebecca on the Safe Sport. I've already taken that program through Squash Canada. Does that mean if I'm running a tournament that I'd have to take it again?
No, these requirements will be, they're all sort of nationally recognized courses. So if you've done it for Squash Canada, if you've done it for another sport, they're all recognized across the sport. So you could certainly be your tournament chair or your Safe Sport rep at your tournament.
Okay. Does Squash BC have a record of people who have taken the course through Squash Canada?
Yes.
If you're on a Squash Canada committee, do they get records of that?
Yeah, so it's sort of 2 ways. There is definitely, communication back and forth between Squash BC and Squash Canada. The other thing, as well as the Coaching Association of Canada, has a national training database, which an individual would need to sort of take a specialized training to be able to access, which Josh and I have both done. So we can actually access the national database of training. So even if you've taken one of those courses because you're a soccer coach for your kids' soccer team, we can still access and see that you've taken that course, so long as that sport or that venue that you've taken it through has uploaded it, which 99% of the time they have. So.
Right. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for somebody that's involved with the court advocacy. I feel like in many situations when a facility, courts in a particular facility might be at risk, sometimes people learn about that before it becomes public knowledge. What mechanisms are in place to maybe share that information in such a way that I guess perhaps the facility isn't harmed if that news becomes public? I'm not sure if I'm making myself very clear, but yeah, I feel like by the time an actual announcement is made and it becomes public knowledge, it's probably too far gone to be able to reverse that sort of decision that might have been made.
And Andrew, and I would say that's certainly true of what's happened in the past, for sure. It's been too late, and we have, and there also hasn't been, I think, the support there for those facilities at risk. So the hope is, with the tools that we're developing, as well as with the court advocacy task force that would be in place, we'll have some experts on that task force, that clubs that feel they are at risk or could be potentially at risk will feel that they can come forward to that group in privacy, to go through and work with that group to see what we can do to help before anything goes public. So catching them early. We've also created what we've called, it's still in draft, but a club health checklist, which if clubs are completing it, they will see where their potential weaknesses might be. So that's another piece, another tool that will be in the bailiwick of things to help with. So any other questions? No? So why don't we just turn it over to the AGM at this particular point. Natasha can start that meeting, and then know that at the end of the AGM, we're here for other questions. So anyone, please stay on. We'll ask all of your questions. We've got lots of time at that point. So Natasha, off you go to the formal part.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to call to order the Squash BC Annual General Meeting, May 29th, 2021 at 11:09 a.m. via Zoom. So I'd like to acknowledge the Board of Directors in attendance, Leonard Bruno, Cindy Longley, Fahim Gwadri, Bruce Matthews. Also recognize the staff in attendance, Nancy Thompson, Rebecca Anton, Josh Hooving, Seven Carnegie Preston, Richard Yendel, Sean Zurikowski. I'd like to ensure, or it's recorded, that we are record Secretary of Minutes. That's Nancy Thompson. So the first notice of our AGM was communicated to the membership on May 13th, which is in accordance to our bylaws. And looking through the agenda, as you can see, as was communicated and is listed here, I want to, let me just see here, sorry. Move to the motion to approve the agenda as it's listed on the screen. Can I get someone to propose it? Can I get a proposer?
We've got some in advance already, Natasha. So we've got Ben Uliana who has proposed, and Brian Coverton who has seconded this motion already.
Okay. Apologies, I didn't have that list in advance.
No
okay.
worries.
So, so the motion to approve, proposer Benjamin Uliana, seconder Brian Covington. So we're going to open up the polls.
And just a reminder, this vote is only, excuse me, for those voting members. So if you're a club or facility rep or a zone rep today, you can go ahead and vote on the screen now. For those of you who do carry 2 votes, either because you're holding a proxy or because you're a zone rep with multiple votes, only you need to vote once, and then I can do the calculations on my end.
Oh, I apologize, Rebecca. I skipped over that voting slide. That was my fault.
That's all right.
Do you want me just to recover, just to cover that for everybody verbally, or do you want to do that verbally?
You can go ahead if you like. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So again, apologies. So in terms of voting, who can vote? So member club representatives, 1 representative per club, 2021 zone representatives, zones 1, 3, 4, 6A, 6B, 7, 8, 7 and 8 each have 1 vote. Zones 2 and 5 have 2 votes each. And so what we're doing, as you can see on screen, is the polling. For those who have seen this before, you're familiar with it, but for those who haven't, each time there's a motion, the motion will pop up on your screen. Voters can click for, against, and abstain and hit enter, and then Rebecca will calculate the votes and tell us the result. If someone has more than 1 vote, so an example, a club representative or a zone rep, Rebecca will calculate those votes. So no need for a voter to do that twice. Okay.
So it looks like everybody who has a vote has voted on this one. So we'll end the polling and share the results here. You should be able to see that was passed unanimously.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So we will look for the approval of the 2020 AGM minutes. That was sent in the package. Now we have a proposer and seconder for that, so.
Yes, so the proposer for this one was Andrew Lynn and the seconder Nathan Ozog.
Thank you. And Rebecca, you have a note in the comment from David O'Brien.
There. Sorry, too many things end up opening up. Thanks, David. So this one here, we had everybody vote with 12 votes for and 1 abstaining. So that one has also passed.
Great. Thank you. And then business arising from the AGM 2020. There were no new business arising from that. So there's nothing to put a motion forward for that. And then we're going to pass this to the next stage to Leonard. So Leonard is going to present on the financial report 2021 and the budget. Leonard.
Hey, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. Our financial results this year are a direct reflection of the restrictions related to COVID. We're no doubt all aware of how our sport was impacted, and from a financial perspective, we did well from a cash perspective. The public, the sources of public funding that we received from various organizations added to our cash position. And as a result, we finished with a substantial amount of cash in our bank accounts. How we arrived there is due to funding from Via Sport with their emergency funding, funding from the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, and those two are by far the most significant sources of additional funding. The overall results of revenues collected, we collected over $227,000, which compares to $422,000, a substantial decrease. However, the expenditures decreased slightly more to $221,000 compared to $413,000. The primary reason for the major decreases in both revenues and expenditures is related to tournament fees and expenditures. Obviously, we didn't have any. And the funding we received from public organizations were given to us in anticipation that the normal activities would occur possibly just around the corner. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And as a result, we chose not to recognize all the revenues that we received. $74,000 approximately of revenues that we collected and did not include in the revenues that I mentioned were deferred, meaning we have the money in the bank and we recognize it on our balance sheet as an amount that we will spend when we are back to a normal set of activities. By deferring that $74,000, we only show a surplus of just over $6,000 rather than $9,000 compared to last year. So we finished the year with a surplus. However, you can argue that the actual surplus is over $80,000. The argument for the approach we took is the optics of showing a substantial surplus this year, and then when we're back to normal operations and we ramp up our costs, we're likely to finish with a substantial deficit. And that I think in both instances, a large surplus in the current fiscal year or the past fiscal year, and then a possible substantial deficit in the fiscal year we are in right now, would not be representative of what is actually occurring from a financial perspective. So the surplus of $6,165 is a managed result. I guess that's the best term I can give. And we made a conscious decision to manage our finances in order to ensure we finish each fiscal year with a surplus. We've set a goal for ourselves to grow our net assets, the net assets representing, in our situation, basically cash in the bank. We want to make sure that we grow our net assets to an amount that gives us a level of flexibility in the event of some type of unfortunate circumstance where we may run into a lack of funds, and yet we wish to continue operations. So we consider it a restricted operating reserve. We currently have more than 60,000, I believe, in $63,000 in net assets, up from 57,000 in the prior year. Of that $63,000, we are growing a separate reserve, and we aim to grow that reserve up to a minimum of $50,000. So we have set as a objective over the next several years to ensure we achieve surpluses so that our restricted operating reserve grows to that $50,000 level. The if we go to the next slide, if there is one, I don't recall.
This is the final slide.
That's the final slide. All right, well, geez, that was a lot briefer than I expected. I've touched on the main points. I didn't reread my report. It's part of the package. You can read it at your leisure. I touched on the main points: decreased revenues, decreased expenses, deferred contribution, achieving a surplus, and growing our net assets. Those are the points that I wanted to emphasize and leave with you. And there is one last point I just recalled. The financial statements were reviewed by our independent reviewer, a chartered professional accounting firm. This is the second year we have engaged our reviewer to conduct a review as opposed to an audit. We did that for cost-saving purposes, and we're satisfied with the type of engagement. The first year we had what was considered, what is considered an unqualified opinion. This year we received a qualified opinion. In some instances, that might be cause for concern. However, in this instance, it's not any cause for concern. The standards for a review engagement changed in 2015 and were applicable to financial statements starting with 2018. And as a result, it is now common for not-for-profit organizations in Canada to receive what's considered a qualified conclusion. The essence of a qualified conclusion in our situation, and again with most not-for-profit organizations involved with fundraising activities, involves the challenge in determining the amount of funds collected. There's a principle in accounting. I won't get overly technical, but there's a particular principle that is a standard, and the amount of evidence to collect and consider in relation to that principle is insufficient and in terms of quantity, and lacks in quality to meet that particular standard. So because of that inherent challenge, we will always have a qualified opinion with regard to that specific item. Everything else was reviewed in an unqualified, on an unqualified conclusion basis, meaning the results of our operations and how we reported them are fairly transparent. And that is the final point that I wanted to share. And if there are any questions, I am open to hearing and possibly answering if I can.
Leonard, there's one question on the chat. It's Nancy. And the question is, does having all that cash make it more difficult to get future grants? Do you want me to handle that, or do you?
How about you go for it, and I can chime in on anything that might be a gap in the reply.
Terrific. Okay. Great question. And the short answer is I don't believe it will, because really our bottom line is we have, we're showing about a $6,000 surplus. And so, no, it shouldn't make any difference as we go forward. And certainly with this coming year, we'll be applying for those grants on our fiscal 22 budget, not based on our 21 budget. So they'll see those, and there's always opportunity to write notes in there about what the situation is. So short answer, I don't think so.
I like to chime in on that. I share Nancy's optimism, and and yet I am conservative in nature. It's part of my profession. I reflected on that particular question in deciding or being part of the decision to defer the $74,000 and to carry well, regardless, we have the cash in the bank. Whether we deferred it or recognized it, it would not have changed that. The funding that we get is has been received on a fairly consistent basis, and other than the experience under COVID, where we didn't have an opportunity to spend the money that we received, nothing else has changed. So on the principle that for consistency purposes, we should receive the same level of funding as we've had in the past, I share Nancy's optimism. Then my conservative mind kicks in, and if I was a public funding agency and my group of not-for-profits all seeking grant funding are all flush with cash, I might wonder how much funding I might provide, especially given the sorry state of public financing. So I do remain optimistic. However, I do carry an element of concern that we might not be as successful getting the same level of funding. And if that should happen, that's all right, because we do have $74,000 of deferred contribution that is available for us to continue operations in the normal course that we have enjoyed in the past. So the short answer is it won't matter.
Are there any other questions that Leonard or Nancy can answer regarding financials?
There's another one in the chat. This from Andrew Lynn. Was any consideration given to reducing the amount of money paid by facilities this past year, given the fact that a significant amount of revenue ended up being deferred, or perhaps what will be required to pay for this coming year?
So if I understand that question correctly, should we have reduced our membership fees as a result of the extra funding that we receive from public organizations? Would that be a fair paraphrasing of your question?
Yes.
Okay. I believe we did adjust our fees early on in the pandemic to reflect the circumstances. The funding that we received came in some instances as a surprise, and in the situation involving the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the federal government changed the eligibility numerous times. Even most recently, they've extended the program again. And there was no way of predicting how much revenue we would have generated. I suppose with hindsight, we might have considered making further adjustments. However, I think that might raise other issues with going forward, how we would handle the funding that we received in the manner that it was intended to be received. In other words, we received emergency funding on the basis that we lost revenue. If we make a decision to cut back on revenue, that I think goes against the principles of the emergency funding, where it was to replace revenues that were lost that are beyond the control of the organization. So I hope that that answers that question.
I can confirm that we offered a 10% discount to our facilities.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the financial report and statements?
Okay. So before we move to the motions, Rebecca reminded me or noted that we didn't establish quorum, just for the records. So Rebecca, how many members do we have, voting members?
We have 13 voting members on the call who are holding a total of 18 votes, including one proxy that's being held. And quorum, according to our bylaws, is 5 votes. So we do have quorum today.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. With that, then, Leonard, do you want me to read out the motions?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay, so we have 3 motions related to finance in some form. The first motion is the motion to accept the 2020-21 revenue or reviewed financial statements as presented. The proposer is Leonard Bruno. The seconder is Drew Henderson. Poll is open, I believe.
So there's the results from that motion, which has passed as well.
Thank you. The next motion is a motion to appoint the review engagement practitioner, Hay and Watson, for 2021-22. Proposer Leonard Bruno, seconder Drew Henderson. Oh, sorry, it was Sean who would propose the previous one. It's Drew who's proposing this, seconder on this one. Poll open.
Oh. Just give me one moment here. It looks like a few more people are starting to vote in here. So just a reminder, if you're not one of those club members or a zone rep, that you shouldn't be voting. So just let me calculate these votes here quickly. Okay, what I'm going to do is relaunch this one. If you are not a voting member, please do not click anything. Don't click abstain, just only for or against or abstain if you are a voting member.
Okay, and this one is the motion to appoint the review engagement practitioner Hay and Watson for the next year.
We'll give it a few more seconds here. Ten more seconds if anybody's left who hasn't voted yet, who is a voting member.
Like an auction.
Going once, going twice. Okay, so this one has passed.
Thank you. The next financial motion is the motion to appoint the following people as signing officers for Squash BC for 2021-22. Natasha Dukas, Bruce Matthews, Leonard Bruno, and Nancy Thompson. The proposer is Victor Berg, and the seconder is Jimmy Vallier.
So this one, Jimmy wasn't able to join us today in the end. So if we can get a seconder who is on the call. Anybody willing to put their hand up to second this motion?
Marcus, thank you.
Okay, so there's the poll open now for those of you who are voting members. We'll give this one 10 more seconds. I know a few people have dropped off, so these won't all necessarily have 13 people voting for them. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. This one has also passed.
Thank you. Okay, there is actually one more motion on this end, and it's the motion to accept the recommendation of the 2020-21 Board of Directors that the 2021-22 membership dues remain the same as this past year. Proposed by Leonard Bruno, seconded by Vicky Lust.
Poll is open.
Meaning they won't increase. That's the key.
I'll give this one 10 more seconds. And closed. This one has also passed.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I'm turning it over to Natasha for the next series of motions.
Excellent, thank you. So the next one is a motion to appoint Jimmy Valliere as referee in chief for the 2021-22 season.
And this one was proposed by Vicky Lust and seconded by Cindy Longley.
Vicky Lust left the meeting.
Oh, thanks, Natasha. I missed that. Do we have somebody on the call who can propose this?
Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. So Andrew, proposer, seconder, Cindy Longley.
I'll give this one a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this one has passed as well.
Terrific.
Great. Okay. And the next one is resolutions of the board. So the motion that the membership ratify the decisions and actions of the board of directors from the 2020-21 fiscal year. Proposer Andrew Lynn, seconded by Bruce Atkins.
Poll is open.
There's just a lot of motions in these AGMs.
5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
This one has also passed.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is acceptance of the board and committee reports. So the motion is to accept the board and committee reports from 2020-21 as presented. The proposer, Victor Berg, and seconded by Rebecca Vasilikakis.
Poll is open. Give this one 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. This one has passed.
Thank you. Okay. Next one, election of board of directors. And so I'd like to pass this to Nathan Ozog, chair of the nominations committee, to provide his report summary.
Thank you, Natasha. Nice to see everybody. A lot of people haven't seen in quite a while. I know we're behind schedule, so I'll be very brief. The nominations committee was comprised this year of Natasha, Nancy, myself, Andrew Clements, and Karen Levine. We held 7 meetings over the period of about 2 months where we determined the returning board members and the number of spots available. We were very fortunate to have a strong new candidate in Sam Crawford, who is in the motion to become a new director. We also were able to complete the complement of zone representatives. And at the suggestion of Natasha and Nancy, we went a little further this year and also did some canvassing for volunteers for some of the committees. So I think it was a very productive committee. I want to thank, or task force, I want to thank the members of it for their good work. And unless there are any questions, I will propose the motion to approve by acclamation returning directors Rachel Au, Fahim Gowdry, Bruce Matthews, and our new director, Sam Crawford, for two-year terms as directors at large of Squash BC.
And I will open the poll on this one.
Just as we do that, the proposer was Rebecca Vasilikakis and seconded by Sean. As people are voting, I was thinking back to the days when we were together and could use those squash racket bats to vote.
5 more seconds on this one. 4, 3, 2, 1. And this one has passed as well.
Great. I'd like to take a moment to thank those and congratulate those for returning to the board, and for Sam Crawford, our newest board director. So congratulations. We're excited to have you join our board. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. Number 14, appoint voting rights for zones for 2022 and AGM, 22 AGM. Nathan.
Yes, so I think the motion is fairly straightforward. So the motion is to appoint zones 1, 3, 4, 6A, 6B, 7, and 8 of 1 vote, and zones 2 and 5, 2 votes.
The proposer is Drew Henderson and is seconded by Bruce Atkins.
And Drew had to jump off the call already, so if we can get a new proposer for that.
I can be the proposer, I think.
Great. Thank you, Nathan.
Poll is open. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. That one has passed as well.
Great, thank you. And then 15, other new business. So Leonard, I'll leave that to you to bring up any other business.
I think the question is more from the membership. Is there any other business that people would like to discuss?
Thank you, Nancy. You saved me because I couldn't recall what the other.
It came as a surprise, I knew.
So is there any other new business from the community? Not seeing anything in the chat. So by the silence, I will just assume nothing new. And then looking to date and location of the next AGM. So we are proposing that it's May 28th, 2022 via Zoom. The situation that we're in I mean, I know in the past, prior to 2020, we tried to move around in the province to be physically there in different communities and supportive. The last couple years doing these Zoom calls, I think it's been a way to allow more engagement, accessibility to the meetings and the AGM. So at this point, I think we'd stick with the Zoom calls and we'll see. We'll notify if there's any date changes, but we're proposing that it's May 28th, 2022. Okay. Now, at this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. So a motion to adjourn the 2021 Annual General Meeting of Squash BC at 11:46 a.m. I'm looking for a proposer and a seconded by.
We need to get a proposer and a seconder.
Yeah. So could I have a proposer?
I'll propose.
Thanks, Sean. So Sean proposing.
I'll second it. Shelley.
Thanks, Shelley. And Shelley seconded. We'll put up the poll.
Certainly.
And Richard, I see you on the chat, so I know you want to get your name in there, proposer and seconder.
Okay, the poll is open. Five more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Great, thank you. So the meeting is closed and or adjourned, the AGM, and now we're going to pass it to Nancy because she wants to go through the just the recognition video, and then after that we'll be open for any questions and any further discussion after that. Thank you.
Terrific, thanks. I don't think I need to say anything other than enjoy the slide presentation that you're going to be receiving in 1 second. Oh, so dramatic. And I'd really like to thank Josh and Rebecca for putting that together for us. And thanks to everyone who contributes to making Squash NBC successful, fun, and possible. There's so many of us. It wouldn't be possible without hundreds of people. So thank you.
And I want to jump in and thank, everyone for putting this presentation together. Looking at that video too, it it feeds my soul just seeing all the volunteers, all the committee members, all the contractors, the staff, the board. This past year has been exceptional from my view in terms of being president on the board. Sorry, I don't mean to get emotional here, but you know what? I love this sport. I'm passionate. I see all your passion, and I thank you for all your hard work that you have contributed to this organization, to making this sport the way it is. I want to move on to recognizing another leader in our sport, and that's Nancy Thompson. And Nancy, I've worked with her for, I think we're getting around 8 or 10 years now through various roles. And she announced her retirement mid-April or earlier April this year, and wanted to recognize the work that she's done as an executive director, leading the organization, leading the change in the model of the organization, driving the engagement and growing the sport, and coming with the mindset of this growth initiative to grow our sport. And wanted to put some recognition together for it. So I have Sandra in the background there presenting something for Nancy on behalf of the board and staff.
I'm going, who the hell is coming into the office? I had the door shut.
Yeah, well, Nancy, you made it hard. I thought you were going to be home today, so we had a few people help out to coordinate.
That was very tricky because I didn't tell anyone where I would be. Now you do.
It's amazing what technology can do between texts and Zoom chat. So thanks, John Grant. So this is Nancy, in just recognition for your contributions to the sport of squash around the province.
Look at that. That's
and
amazing.
We have a little engraving at the bottom from all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so generous. And it's been my pleasure and my privilege to work with all of you in squash for the last 7 or 8 years. It's been terrific. I've been very pleased to be able to do what I've been able to do. And I'm not gone yet. I'm still around for a while, and I'll still be playing and all that good stuff, but just going back into retirement now. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So Josh, I don't know if you want to show a few things, but there are, and I don't know if you can take the music off, but there are a few, well, I shouldn't say a few, there are many significant contributions that Nancy has made to the sport. And there are areas where, she's driven the organization on many aspects. So we just put together a bit of a slideshow and, to highlight these areas. So Josh, I'll leave you play that. It was not easy finding pictures of you, Nancy. You're the one usually taking the pictures. But we wanted to recognize just your leadership, the growth initiative, driving that within the organization, the relationship building, the engagement, and looking at the revenue generation, the grants, being creative, figuring out how we can just bring more revenue into the organization to actually support the clubs, the facilities, the membership. And also in this past, year and a half with the COVID-19 is that return to squash and being there to support the community in any way we can. So thank you.
Thank you. What a nice tribute.
So I'll leave it to you, Nancy, if you want to lead on any questions or from the community, if you want to we'll leave that open to anybody who wants to have any further discussion or ask any questions.
I think in addition to acknowledging Nancy's amazing contribution to Squash BC, I think it goes without saying that everyone's involvement on the board, zone reps, etc. What a monumental year and a bit it's been, and amazing job to everybody for getting us to this point. So well done, Natasha and Nancy, terrific leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a few people signing off. So it's great to see everybody. Thank you for joining. Love to see your faces and hope to see you out on the court soon. As we move forward, it's nice to see some restrictions easing a little bit. So I know some people I'll be, connecting with outside in the great weather that we're having, and others I'll try connecting soon in other ways to get back on the court.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.